capitalism, all of the gains in automation, it goes to the owner class. All you have to do is have everyone be an owner, and now suddenly any gain in automation is a gain for everybody. If you grow just one thing, it may not grow as well as if it grows with another thing. A good example of that is called the Three Sisters method of farming.
There is definitely multi apartment buildings or multifamilies that do passive design.
$100 million that they gave to Joe Rogan that they would kind of be out if they breach contract. Is that a bigger number, or is 2 billion a bigger number?
I don't know,
It's
Zach.
a tough one. I
It's
know,
really hard.
and maybe comparing numbers is not Jeremy's strong suit. Gotta go kill a Jenny.
I still don't think you should kill her. I don't think it's a good idea.
It's a ghost, dude. Welcome back, everybody, to Bread Theory. It's been a while since we had Dan on the show. I've been dealing with stuff in my personal life and getting a new job. I'm now going to be working as a teacher at a school I'd worked at previously, which is very exciting. But that kind of threw a wrench in our streaming plans recently. But we're back in the saddle. Thank you for joining us once again, Dan. How you doing
So you're
tonight?
no longer a dirty bum.
That's right. I've rejoined the productive class.
Productive society, yeah. Citizenship.
Yeah. Oh man. Never have I felt more capitalist realism than being out of work. You feel like, and I know it's not true, but you feel like you're absolutely worthless. Everyone else has a purpose, and here you are just mooching off the system. All that sort of thing.
The quick antidote is to go around your neighborhood and just start randomly fixing or improving things, even if it's
Yeah.
like weeding a lot, like not just a lot, but around sidewalks or like just beautifying, watering
Sure.
flowers, that kind of stuff. Oh yeah, so much to we could discuss. So, like every week, I would have thoughts of like, oh yeah, I want to talk. I would love to talk about Zach or other leftist friends of mine about this, and I do. I have did Coffee of Comrades yesterday.
Oh, fun. I love that show.
It's not a show, or I guess it's a show, but this was also just a meetup.
Oh, just a meetup.
Yeah,
Oh. Are you not talking about the podcast
no,
titled Coffee with Con? Oh.
no.
It's just a local
Yes,
thing.
I believe you that there's a podcast called Coffee
Oh,
of
okay.
Comrades, but they're copying the many groups would just have a meetup called Coffee with Comrades.
Oh, really?
We've
I was
been
not aware of that.
little local socialist party has been doing that for 5 years.
That's cool.
But they kind of almost do it only like a few times a year. When oh god, it was Hudson River Coffee House on Hudson Street. There would actually be like 12 people coming, and there would be people that weren't activists coming,
Well, that's a
and
decent
I
turnout.
would get to see some more academic anarchist types
Mm-hmm.
once in a while that I would never see otherwise. I'm like, what are you guys doing for leftism? But at least to know they exist and they're around. Um, there's the new so I've been discussion questions for go arounds as a facilitator since I'm starting to do that more often, and I'm doing a talk at work on facilitating and meetings. My icebreaker now is like, what are you reading, watching, or working on?
Nice.
I have finished, and at work I've been able to kind of read short books because that's at least like I can an hour at a time. And I finished the book, The Occult Features of Anarchism.
The
It's mirrored.
occult features of anarchism.
Mirrored on it.
Interesting.
But anyway, what is the source of this? So, Erica Langnese, Quebecois Montrealian anarchist, during the Occupy movement, many meetings, and also many Reddit threads and online spaces too. and she would once in a while, and this happens if you're in activist space, especially anarchist activist spaces. There'll be somebody who's a conspiracy theorist, or
Oh, yes.
their class analysis is Jews and lizard people, or
Oh, geez.
Illuminati and stuff like that. And so this person, this academic, who is very much an academic, wanted to get to the bottom of this, not only to dispel the mysterious about it, demystify, but also, well, one half is a historical essay about the occult and anarchism, and then like the last third is sort of kind of like Orwell, kind of a like, okay, here's what anarchist spaces are doing wrong in their elitism. There's a book that she kind of contributed to called Good Politics, that, oh, in these spaces we have good politics. And if you're, it's a type of cancel culture and exclusionary politics of dismissal. If you're not fitting our definition of good politics, then you're out. And you're not allowed to be in the space because you're too challenging, or we don't have this bandwidth for this. We're not going to have extra discussions to hammer out or world views or something like that. I mean, it's sort of like it's an admission of we're not going to put in the time to better understand and work with people. We're too, it's not matter, sometimes too lazy. We're just going to make sure we all are us click, just have, our space is a click, essentially. Or somebody is like blatantly anti-Semitic, we'll cut that, like saying like, well, a lot of bankers are Jews. Is it wrong to point that out? And you'll have a third of the group say, well, they do have a point. And this is the main anecdote that they use to kind of talk about, well, to just point out, it's like, so we're not going to interrogate that a third of us were like actually sympathetic to the anti-Semitism, but we're going to say this working class person needs to get the ban hammer because they're anti-Semitic, even when a third of us are like, well, they have a point about the Jews being bankers.
Yeah.
Something wrong is happening.
Something
here.
Off there.
We're not really doing good politics then, are we? But the fascinating part that really got me, my goat, was what are the cult features of anarchism? Well, to put it generally, so we're not getting into all the philosophy. There's a few of these chapters are just heavy philosophy. I always like the more grounded, like what was really happening. A lot of all the revolutionary kind of movements, grassroots, from in the 18th and 19th centuries, were overlapping with Freemasonry, and the Illuminati was pretty much a clandestine anarchist collective of academics. I mean, they didn't really do anything except try to organize themselves or find each other. And they had bad OPSEC, and they were crushed within a decade because one of their members shared what they were, share what they were doing to an employer who happened to be an Hungarian Duchess. Bavarian Duchess.
What?
So, because it was started in Bavaria.
Sure.
And the Bavarian royal family thought the Illuminati was simply a plot by the Austrian royal family because they were rivals. And but at the time, actually, no, this is before that. But it gets worse because in 1812 you get the Conspiracy of Kings, known as the Congress of Vienna, where all the royal families agree to share all their intelligence, that their enemies are not each other, but they're radical elements in each country. And we need to put a stop to that. So you need these more clandestine, good OPSEC organizations, which the Freemasonry, with all their special handshakes, ranks, and secrecy, are really good at doing mutual aid on the sly. And it's where anarchists, the first anarchists, were organizing. So the Illuminati are behind the left, it's true. But the Illuminati, or this first group, or the Masons, they were all liberals, which included sympathetic socialists. And so the first international workers meetings were in Mason halls, Masonic temples. And, Bakunin was a Mason. You had all these anarchist names that were also Masons.
Really?
It was a place to go. It was like the DSA of its time.
Oh, okay.
Though it was also not part of the government, so it had that going for it. and it was it was social clubs of liberal businessmen, but they all had a leveling ideology. They were leveling groups because the Masons were originally levelers
Uh-huh.
in the Renaissance, um, or at least they were workers' associations.
So they just took
So
that
our
metaphor.
symbology, the 5-point star, the A with a circle.
Mm-hmm.
These are the kind of geometric shapes and symbols that were used by the Masons or come from that milieu of thinking of the divine geometry
Sure.
of the world.
Of the cosmos,
And
yeah.
that is different than the established religions of king and country, which we're very much not wedded to.
Interesting.
So I found that very interesting. I may need to reread it to kind of get because it's a little dense,
Yeah.
especially the philosophy part, going to hermetics and what is that? The first premise, the theology of politics, it goes into a lot of that anthropology, a lot of very heady stuff. But there was a word that was really good. I made a note at work, but it was a good word for when someone's underclass, but without using under or um I'll have to pull it up. I think it was in the later essay. But like you got the original this anarchist picture, you're aware of
Yep.
this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Pyramid.
Right.
Pyramids everywhere, eyes, and all that stuff. It's not well, I mean, it gets funky when it turns into like the left is Satan. And it's like
Mm-hmm.
these symbols are Satanist symbols, actually, not
Yeah.
the leveling
Well, sure.
egalitarian
Yeah.
values, which is what it really was. Drawing attention to the pyramid, not
Right.
saying, "Oh yes, we need a pyramid as a society."
Right. Yeah.
So yes,
We need this pyramid, but with different people at each level or something.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm reading. How's
That's cool.
your work making? So it's with special needs kids?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to be working with autistic learners for the most part.
Hmm.
There are
Is that
some.
within the school district or private?
It is a charter school, so they
Charter.
have a unique
Pseudo
district.
public.
Yeah, pseudo public school. Yeah. Yep.
Public money, private
Yep.
management.
Private management. That's for sure. Yeah, I definitely have my qualms with the charter school system, but
We all do.
got to take the opportunities that are
We could
presented
see
to
it
you.
here in Albany, a mile away, because it was the movement was started here.
Oh, was it really?
I thought I explained this. Maybe it was years ago, but I'll
Maybe you did,
re-explain.
but
It it really started in Saratoga County, but it started in our region because. And by the way, this was a one St. Rose professor. St. Rose is now a private college that's closing because of real estate management.
hmm,
It's not the only private college to be closing. It's a big trend, actually. But in our area, religious and parochial schools were the school system. We had a very weak public school system.
hmm,
Like it was just a patronage mill for the machine, the political machine. And so it was always low quality. Like the public schools were just for blacks and Jews. If you were Catholic, you went to the Catholic schools. Protestants, Lutherans, you had your own schools, and you had and the church, being the big institution it was in the 1950s, could subsidize everyone's tuition. So even though they kind of were private schools, so many could go there with their tuition covered
hmm.
because the churches were well funded. Something happened in the 80s that kind of put an end to that. But obviously, you have larger social trends, but particularly in the late 80s, that's when the sex scandals start coming out.
Uh-huh.
And you have people start coming forward, which breaks the trust cycle and the crisis of membership.
Hmm.
So you have all these people in Albany who probably like would have used the Catholic school system or the private schools, but they can't. There's no tuition anymore. This is especially the poor and blacks. so there was almost an expectation of this, but conversely, the there was obviously a move to make our public school system of higher quality, but this would require raising taxes. And the machine retained power because they were able to keep taxes so low. Like we had
Really?
suburban taxes in a city
That's the deal
because
they've got
everything
with
was
the.
underfunded,
Yeah.
just enough to keep the buildings from crumbling, but never improve them. And so then we had magnet schools, and I've kind of mentioned those as essential to my high quality education. But the plan was, okay, let's make all the schools magnet schools, and the taxpayer base were like, hell no. And so the superintendent quit, and he started fundraising for charter school. Like he went to the charter school movement, and the privatizers were all on board. It's all part of neoliberalism in the 90s. So in the late 90s, we have the first charter schools opening up. And within 5 years, they're closing, but more are opened because you have all these investors, but investors in one way. And what confused me as a kid, because I'm like 12 here, I'm noticing that these charters, they look like Catholic schools. They're having the kids wear uniforms, like the
Uniforms.
Catholic
Yeah.
school uniform, or they were gendered. There was like all girls or all boys.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, why is that essential to like this? And they're only inviting the kind of the poorest families to bring their kids in. I'm like, why? Because they're being so the public schools suck so bad. And I guess I understand that they are underperforming in the public schools, right? The kids. So it's the school, not just the fact that they're poor, and that creates a poor educational environment. So, but I found like actually the black families of the North End are actually pretty conservative. They're all very, it's the let's see, the political typology is the faith and family
Ah,
demographic
gotcha.
of Democrats. Like they're Democrats, but they're socially conservative. But they're minorities, so they care about, sort of enough government to keep the market from enslaving them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty odd, but we have a number of them still operating, of course. They're not dropping like flies, but the first ones have all closed. They all kind of went bust because you could see when they were started that this is going to be a fiasco, and they're actually going to cost more in public money than if they were regular elementary schools.
Yeah, really, you could say it even from the beginning, huh?
Yeah, but I mean, teachers at the charters kind of talk like they seem to have more freedom in how they operate their classrooms, for good or ill. Usually for good, because these are teachers that are of
Yeah.
our age group or a little above Gen
Right.
X. So it's not like they're, oh, I can do what I want. I can beat the kids. They mean that they can actually spend 20 minutes doing in their homeroom having a conversation,
Right.
talking to the kids about their family life or whatever.
Yeah. So far,
Otherwise,
I would say that's true. I definitely have a lot of leeway in the field of educational resources I can draw from. I'm not just locked into one set curriculum that the whole district has to use and follow it this, and the other thing in sequential order. So, yeah.
or it's standardized for efficiency's sake.
Right. So that's been cool to see, but there's definitely downsides too.
Mm-hmm. So, I put in some videos. One of them is just to talk about the title because I don't care to watch it.
Oh.
And it's longer. It's a Ben Burgess. I just wanted to rant about Ben
Ben
Burgess.
Okay, sure.
I have kind of a script in my head, but I'm gonna rant. I'm gonna pop around. Probably more tired than I am. Woefully undersleeping.
Yeah, I feel that. Honestly, you want to
Because
start with that one
I'm
then?
playing Horizon sequel and the Forbidden West, and so I'm losing an hour of sleep every night playing that.
Interesting. So what is Horizon?
This is the open world game where you are like a primitive hunter fighting dinosaur machines.
Dinosaur machines, huh?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a very good sci-fi story, though.
Cool.
So I'm enjoying that quite a lot. But I'm now in the end game now, so I'm in the cleaning up the side quests. But here's a quibble. I hit the level cap of 50, but there's still like, I don't know, 10%. Like I hit the cap, but there was still like 20% more missions to do.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's
So
like I'm not getting
destroy some incentives.
experience.
Yeah.
I guess I am. Well, no, am I? Because there's still things I haven't unlocked on the skill tree. But I think I'm gonna. They're not gonna. I'm not gonna. I'm getting experience, which equals skill points, but I'm not getting any more levels. I mean, I'm definitely the highest level. I will finish. I will beat the game easily. I mean, I'm fighting the bigger machines, and I'm not
Sure.
having too much trouble with it now. I'm actually having fun, feeling like a badass instead of just like, oh shit, I almost died. Oh shit, I almost died.
That's always a good point to get to.
Oh yeah, Souls, like a Souls game.
Okay.
With some of these fights, but it's a wonderful game.
That's cool. Yeah, my kids just got me into this new Pal World game that came out.
Oh,
Which is
how is it?
The Pokemon survival.
It's gonna dethrone it. It's gonna dethrone Pokemon.
Supposedly so. So of course they've been playing it for hours already, so they have all top tier gear and stuff, and here I am with absolutely nothing. So I spent most of my time dying. The things that were easily preventable. You got too cold, and
because is it all PvP or is it just an RPG?
No, it's kind of.
But you're just not doing well.
It's kind of open world. It's like Minecraft and Pokemon put together, and it's like, what if you could?
Everything has to be like Minecraft,
right?
My niece has gotten into Minecraft. She's discovered it. She's doing it all, and it's kind of annoying when she wants to show me stuff. I'm just like, you're having fun, wonderful fun.
Yeah,
you know, and you're 11. This is the great puzzle solving you're doing, but
right.
I better not see you do this when you're 13. You better be doing. You better be leveled up to like drafting software or something.
Oh yeah, yeah. But yeah, what was I gonna say about it? Oh, yeah, it's an alright.
Some of them have guns, I hear.
Yes,
yes. It's like Pokemon for adults.
Oh, that's what I was gonna say. It's like, what if in Pokemon you could force your Pokemon into like indentured servitude, basically? So they'll like craft things for you while you're gone, and guard your camp, and all these sorts of things. You can task
they're no
them to
longer
go gather
pets. They're
resources.
now
Yes, they're
implements of labor.
Yeah, right.
That I've seen not a lot so far, but just a trickle of memes about how it is like. This is the game for the capless hellscape that we live in.
Yep, basically.
While Pokemon was one of like hope and bug collecting,
right,
and having fun and being a kid. Now the adult Pokemon is capless hellscape.
Basically. So, kids have fun. I'm sure they'll play it for a couple weeks, and then there'll be something else out that they get enraptured with. Tends to be how it goes. But for now, it's that one.
And then the Fortnite will be uncool by the time they're old enough, right?
Yeah, thankfully they never got into, or as far as I know, they haven't gotten into Fortnite yet. They do like the first-person shooter type games, but luckily they haven't found that one.
Yeah, but the models are here though, so like whatever's next is going to follow.
It's going to be that
super exploitative, like, or psychologically like terrifying. Loop of gameplay.
Absolutely.
But I guess you could say that about aughts games. Like what? Sure. You play for 10 hours and the game's done, and then you play it over again, the right. same experience, and it's just the same. Well, no, I'm doing it a little better this time.
Right.
I'm doing it faster, so now it only takes 6 hours. I don't have to. Yeah.
Right.
Ugh.
Yeah, man. Between World of Warcraft and Minecraft and
okay, well, I didn't play any online games, to be clear.
Yeah,
but yes, it was the stuff of satire. And speaking of that, I'm watching South Park again.
Oh, really?
At least until my Max subscription runs out, because I've ended it. Um, but only then in the last 2 weeks, I'm like, you know what? Let's see if I can figure out when I stopped watching South Park and see if I can pick up. And it is at the point where their formula is starting to get a little tired, and their little quick like turnaround, what do you call them? Twist endings, twist punchlines
Right.
are, wearing thin. I certainly stopped
Jeez.
after their Occupy spoof episode, which really wasn't an Occupy. Well, I guess it was, but again, it kind of showed that like they don't actually understand what they're critiquing most of the time.
Right. They have like half a point
And I
and it
think
gets lost.
they definitely, I think, in taking a break and taking longer with episodes and their season, they could actually understand what they're spoofing, because otherwise they're just using last year's pop culture and then
Right.
putting it on whatever is happening that week.
Yeah, I wonder about them because yeah, it's clear that they're just gonna milk this cash cow for everything it's worth. And
They
like
get shorter.
they
What the seasons get shorter and shorter, so I'm assuming that they're better, or at
yeah,
least
you would
more
assume
thought
so.
out, which is what I'm told.
But what I wonder is, their central critique through all of South Park was Hollywood is not worth paying attention to. These are overinflated egos. They get way too much attention, too much money, all this stuff. They're really all not all that different from them at this point. So I kind of wonder what they think of their own personal arcs through all of this.
I think that's why they kind of shifted in 2016 with
Yeah.
the Trump election. So I'll be interested to see like the run up to that. But again, I'm only at season 17, which
Way
which
back
is
at 17.
2014. Actually, no, it's 2013's.
Yeah.
So I went through Obama Wins, which is their end of 2012 episode, the end of the season, called Obama Wins. So the plot is Cartman steals ballots from swing states, which I guess prove that Romney won actually. And so he's
Right.
using it to negotiate.
Oh, that's funny.
Well, he was just the bagman, apparently. He was hired by the Chinese to steal the ballots so Obama will give them the Star Wars franchise and take it from Disney, because Disney just bought it
Okay.
at this particular time in real life. But he changes his mind because Disney gives him a better offer, represented by an actual Mickey Mouse. I don't know if you've seen this caricature, but he ends every sentence with "ha," even when he says something crass or like "I'm gonna kill you." He's fucking hard barking. So and it kind of ends with like the ballots are found. This proves that Obama didn't win, and again, Kyle just cares about like truth and democracy. And but then everyone's like, and this is Cartman kind of being the voice of like getting what he wants. It's like, but the Chinese just want to protect Star Wars. They just want they're not going to make any movies. They just want to keep it from Disney because they're going to mess it up. And yeah, so
That's funny.
so it's like in the end, like Kyle like gives in. It's like, yeah, saving Star Wars is more important than worrying about who really won. So the ballots are lit on fire. It's a bonfire, and it just ends with everyone kumbayaing like Obama won.
Oh, that's funny.
It's kind of like how the inevitability of it almost.
Right. Yeah.
And I think I found it irksome that they didn't do a Romney parody. They just had a duck that when he talks, it's just diarrhea comes out. So yeah, I have the poop joke, but it's a mirror, not a mirror. It's a repetition of a joke where, which I did rewatch, and I actually kind of liked it. I like this one because it's one of the few that kind of ends on a downer. It doesn't end with a punchline, but it's Stan turns 10 or 11, and he's getting older, so he's becoming cynical. And the representation is everything looks like shit. And so
Okay.
it's literally everything is like when he listens to music, it just sounds like farting.
Yeah.
And then like the movie, and it's like, oh god, just like big shit on the screen.
Shit on the
Everyone's
screen.
like, dude, like chill out, you're being a downer, like we can't hang out with you. And it's like, and then eventually even Kyle just like starts, he just starts seeing what he was saying is shit. It's like everyone's shit, everyone who says is shit. And it just ends with him basically being a lonely and kind of like, what the hell am I gonna do?
Oh wow.
So, but it just left it on that. Didn't pick it up in the next
Unresolved.
episode.
Wow. That's funny. All right. So do you want to start with that Ben Burgess one?
Sure.
Okay.
Just to rant about the title and rant about defensive politics, because it's kind of what this video is just what it's the third one. It's just what you're left with. It's definitely a case of like, this is the wrong question. It's the question is, who would we rather be the president, Trump or Nikki Haley? Or like, what is it? Oh yeah, no, would we prefer DeSantis or Haley instead of Trump? Right? When you're committed to defensive politics like Ben Burgess, which is just absolute defeatism,
Right.
you're just left with these questions of like, well, who would we rather be fucked by?
Right.
Or what would be less damaging? And then this is like the thing we're left to argue over or talk about. Instead of talking about there being a left or how do we build a left. I mean, he does that sometimes, but it's just so scant. It's like, this is what you're spending time on instead.
Ugh.
So I just want to go, that's the shorter of it.
Okay.
I tire of listening to Ben Burgess. I don't think he's had anything new or novel to say in 5 years. I mean, he gives us an argument, but an argument for what? An argument like to basically give up, because that's kind of what he sounds like half the time. Like he needs to convince himself to care.
Right.
So what's the point of having an argument? Like in fighting the right, but you also have to fight the liberals. But he can't get himself out of the chair to do that. The armchair that he's in.
Right.
Because he is not an actual political strategist.
No.
So you argue, but for what? And I guess sometimes he leans on others. That's, I mean, when he does his show and he talks to someone. But I've in my last job, I listened to a number of his episodes, and they just went around in circles most of the time.
Yeah.
Strategically speaking, or tactics. But the strategy is just to be defensive and not thinking about the large. I mean, sometimes he does, but no, it's. I sometimes confuse him with Doug Lane, but it's Doug Lane who the video I also put in the queue to explore this is like, what do we really want to fight for, and what would be more effective for us to fight for? More social democracy, believing in the state, or something more revolutionary.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
What are we really choosing to be? And Ben is very much committed to not being a revolutionary.
Yeah.
As so many academics kind of are, like they discuss, they study social movements, but they're not practitioners, or at least not good ones.
Yeah. They're not going to come up with the answer forward.
Even though the university is more about discovering and professionalize. I mean, actually, the professionalization of activism is a symptom or result of the not commodification of knowledge, but like the making of knowledge or activism as being something that there's truths to be discovered through in an academic platform or in the university, and it's not found in organizing and testing things there. You have all these papers about other movements, but and our own, but not what could work. I mean, no.
Nothing to drive.
On the other hand, you have many writers that, of course, I'm drawing from, so they are informing us. So I'm not. I don't want to denigrate the academic. In fact, I do see them as a part of this conversation.
Absolutely.
But when asked, like, what should we do? they usually don't have. They have a very vague answer.
Yeah.
And we should take that at face value and move forward with that,
Uh-huh.
and not hold them up as leaders.
Right.
I think that's probably what I'm really warning against. Otherwise, you're left with this kind of conversation. Oh, Trump or Haley or DeSantis. Who would be least damaging?
Picking the lesser evil. Oh, that's
Yeah, well, who's the lesser
what a,
evil?
what a
Who is the
depressing
lesser
topic.
evil?
Right? Yeah. Do you actually want
Who
to look
helps
at the
us
video?
build socialism?
Yeah.
Who would be? How would it be easy? Oh, like sometimes the question is framed as like, who would it be easier to build socialism under? And
even that would be a more productive discussion, I would think,
if it was framed that way.
Yeah.
In the Green Party, we frame it that way. Our answer is usually that it's easier when the right is in power. Because
you have the opposition who's already angry and wanting to do something. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
When the left goes to sleep when a Democrat is president, and we've literally been living through that.
Go back
last
to
cycle.
brunch. Yeah.
The last cycle has been like, what national left? Even people like Ben Burgess have just been stuck in a little morass. Like they're not talking about. I don't know. Sometimes we talk about movements, unionization, but there's nothing big. It's just people in the grassroots trying to do their thing, but it's still not coalescing in anything larger. No national Bernie crab movement. Where'd that go?
Right.
It's been completely liquidated.
That's true.
As Doug Lane would say. So we can go to the next video, which kind of delves into that. Sure. Uses that language.
Is that the Puerto Rico video?
No, that's the Pick Me Up video.
Oh, I see. Sublation Media one.
Yeah, Sublation.
All right.
Why are there so many tankies?
Why are there so many tankies? All right.
Pop.
There's a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Those who remember the New Left mostly think of it as an American phenomenon of the 1960s. The New Left is blended in the popular imagination with hippie culture, along with the Beatles, sexual promiscuity, drug use, and flower power. However, according to Wikipedia, Stuart Hall, the New Left Review, Steele R. James, and most others, the movement to form a new left started in 1956. It started after the Soviet Union brutally suppressed worker-led uprisings in Hungary. As per Hall, socialists after Hungary, it seems to us, must carry in their hearts the sense of tragedy which the degeneration of the Russian Revolution into Stalinism represented for the left.
So there's a lot of different ways to learn data, but most of them?
Shut up.
Today, however, the old left is having a comeback. That is, both the old social democratic welfare state and the Marxist-Leninist tradition are on the march, at least in our imaginations.
There you go.
The letters MLM adorn many a teenage Twitter profile, and an ambivalent love of the state has returned with a vengeance. As we examine our current political moment, as we try to figure out just why the American left has gone from Bernie Sanders to the streets as it prepares itself to be liquidated into the Democratic Party once again, we should ask to what extent the New Left's mission still defines our own, and consider why it is that so many young people, millennials and Zoomers both, call themselves tankies. Why it is that so many reject the New Left's humanism, even as they accept its tactics and aims. Why do many long for the return of Stalin? And what does it mean that they sometimes imagine Stalin to be a queer trans person of color?
Yeah, pause.
We should allow ourselves to ask. And
so what this last minute brings to mind is that in the last cycle, and this includes probably you and me too, is that or rather that the left, millennial left and Zoomers, we took on in the teens, the 08 to 2020, we tried to bring the old left back because the new left had failed so broadly with neoliberalism, their tactics and aims.
Mm-hmm.
And so we attempted to bring the old left aims, but continue with the means of the new left. Like that's kind of what the last minute was about. We're using old left aesthetics and the old left aims of social democracy, right. Like a new Green New Deal even kind of falls onto this, even though it was developed by new left people who are now boomers or have been always boomers. But we're still kind of trying to do this via, the same way as it was done before, I guess, with electioneering, with party within a party, the United Front defensive politics between presidential elections, with a little bit of trying to fight party and a party in between. And that's kind of failed again in 2020. So with that zeitgeist over, I think the next 15 years, now we're 4 years into it, maybe I can make a prediction, that we're going to keep doing new left stuff with our decentralized movements and projects. I'm going to plug away to try to find a synthesis with party building that couldn't be found in the last two zeitgeists.
Oh, that's for sure.
With 90 to 05 to 20. The Green Party could exist, but it hasn't made a big impact, or that or any other formation hasn't taken the place of the new left degeneration or whatever.
There's no party for the left.
There's been no left. The new left was actually no left at all. It was the dispersion of it.
Yeah.
Which is really sad. And we're trying to make a new one, and a new one for the 21st century. And I guess our first experiment was bringing back the old left, at least as far as its goals. But those goals, as kind of, he doesn't get to it towards his conclusion there. But I want to lay it out now as a thesis because he's not good at that, or he doesn't on purpose. Is that it's just we're relying on the state. We're like, it's all state capitalism is the transitionary step that we need to be fighting for. And if the Greens are going to have that as a kind of platform, even though our platform is multi-layered and that it can be state capitalist, or it could be anarcho-syndicalism. You can apply it however you like to any tendency you have. But there needs to be more consensus, I think, going forward, even at least amongst us educated ones. But also kind of looking at what the uneducated but class conscious are doing, where they're sort of, I think that's what I put it. Let's continue.
Yep.
And try to answer the question, why so many tankies? Hello, Zero Books readers and viewers. It's me again, Douglas Lane, and in this video, I'll consider the history of the New Left and Western Marxism, and consider how its failures, their failures, have led to a revival of the Old Left. Along the way, I'll consider excerpts from the book Facing Reality, along with an excerpt from the upcoming Zero Books title Zeitgeist Nostalgia, written by Alessandro Gandini. In his book, Gandini notes that we are still living in the shadow of the 20th century. Particularly, we are living with the memory of the 1950s, or the golden age of capitalism, a period when the idea of the American dream, a house in the suburbs, a man at work, 2 kids, a picket fence, a Dodge Dart in the garage, and a dog in the yard, was firmly established. It was a time when profits were booming, a time when the consumer society was producing miracles, and a time when the Soviet dream, the dream of socialism, was dying.
what are they ahead of us? Wrong, wrong.
In 1956, Nikita Khrushchev began a process of de-Stalinization in the Soviet Union and attempted to find a path to peaceful coexistence with the West. He gave his secret speech denouncing the crimes of Stalin and the Stalinist regime, a speech wherein First Secretary Khrushchev not only admitted that the mass campaign of repression that started in 1936, the rounding up of people on charges of terrorism and Trotskyism, the forced confessions, all of it was politically motivated and not a response to any really existing Trot threat. But he also informed the closed plenum of the 20th Congress of the CPSU that Lenin had never really liked Stalin. This admission, along with the leaderless uprising in Hungary and the brutal repression that followed, led the admittedly already left Trotskyist C.L.R. James to declare that the inhumanity of the form of the bureaucratic totalitarian state, a form that he thought had both the East and the West in its grip, was finally exposed for the whole world to see. He also said that there was a movement of ordinary people forming, a movement of resistance, a movement for autonomy and humanism. In a publication called Facing Reality, published in 1958, C.L.R. James wrote, "For some years after the war, it seemed that the totalitarian state, by its control of every aspect of human life, had crushed forever all hopes for freedom, for liberty, and socialism. Men struggled, but under the belief that the welfare state was in reality only a halfway house to the ultimate totalitarian domination. A symbolic date was even fixed when this would be achieved all over the world." 1984.
Now, I want to pause, though. Who is the writer talking about? Are they talking about the average liberal American, the conservative American who fears the totalitarian state, or is he talking about socialists? Why would socialists believe that? Well, I guess there's American socialists who are more libertine or libertarian, I suppose, or maybe just. Actually, can you go back 30 seconds?
Sure.
I think the excerpt seems incomplete. That's all, and I want to pin down because when for
It
some
seemed
years,
that the totalitarian
but seemed to who? I really care about who the subject is here.
Yeah.
state, by its control of every aspect of human life, had crushed forever all hopes for freedom, for liberty, and socialism. Men struggled, but
Okay,
under
so
the
this must be
belief
leftist. He's talking about leftists.
Yes,
it
that's what I'm
seems.
gathering.
But which leftists? Like, well, I suppose you had, by that time, even like the hardcore communists in America were like getting disillusioned with the Soviet Union, because in the 30s and 40s there was kind of we take a line, we like, this is actually existing socialism, that's what it means to be old left. But I'm not sure, like, I guess the new left was breaking with that, because it seemed like, whether it be Soviet Union or America, okay, we have the social democracy and it's a totalitarian bureaucracy, and we can't build something new out of it, or it's not going in that direction, we have to act.
the welfare state was in reality only a halfway house to the ultimate totalitarian domination. A symbolic date was even fixed when this would be achieved all over the world. 1984. For the New Left, both the welfare state and the Soviet Union were fearsome. The West, with its consumerism, and the East, with its cults of personality, were both pointing in the same direction. A future where humanity would be flattened out. A future where we would be turned into one-dimensional men, stuck in cattle pens, and raised on either NBC or Pravda.
I like this. This is a reminder, and I've read it a few other places in a few other contexts, that the dismantling of the welfare state, of the New Deal, of the coalition, it was bipartisan. And,
yes.
There's always this question nagging at me, like, why did my parents, my then this new left generation, they seem to go along with it. And the reason is they didn't like bureaucracy like anyone else, and they thought it was bad. The welfare state, like the arguments that Reagan or any other conservative, like there was also the left wing complaint and arguments against the welfare state. Now they've differed in that, like, they wanted social spending to go directly to the neighborhoods, to community organizations, and that's how we get the grant system for nonprofits. Get housing, nonprofits get HUD grants. So it's still federal money, it's still social spending, but it's going directly to neighborhood groups. And that's somewhat better. That's better than the welfare state, but it's cut so much along the way that I feel like they played into the right's hands, and they seem to, like, just in the 80s throw up their arms like, well, what can we do? We're outvoted at every turn.
Yeah,
we have
yeah,
to accept
does
the
seem
inevitable and
Mhm.
trudge on and raise our kids, which are me and you.
Yeah, right. Yep. Yeah, that kind of seems to be the 80s for you. Just this is the way the world is. You gotta accept it. Really, that capitalism,
Yeah,
realism
but they played
setting
a
in.
part, though. I mean, the new left weren't really in power,
Right.
but as they were growing up, they became the taxpayer. But not, I guess usually the left is always a minority in America, and that's sort of the problem. And
Yeah.
that's why there's always a defeatist angle of, like, well, we can never really win a 51% anywhere. We just can't, so we have to be part of the ruling coalition
Yeah.
in that sense, and be the party in a party. And that's, I just, that
That bargain
that
does
makes
never
my
work,
head
though.
hurt,
Yeah.
because it's just so depressing.
Yep.
It's just
Well, yeah,
depressing.
that too.
I'm like, how could you make that call for decade after decade? And of course it didn't get better.
Mhm.
Of course the left never grew. If anything, it shrank. You can only go down with the defensive. You have to go on the offensive.
Absolutely, yeah. You got to
You have
stand
to
for something.
outreach.
Right.
Or they do, but within educated enclaves. So it's as people get more educated, there are a larger population accepting of progressive ideas. So that's how queer rights can actually grow
Mhm.
after 1990. So there's that change. It's just you have to go with societal trends instead of trying to form them. And I guess we kind of maybe think that way ourselves as well.
Yeah.
I just don't want to be 80 and just feel like that old trot who
Yeah, right.
has been an academic for who knows, God knows how long.
Decades,
It's
yeah.
like what's this world has changed, and it's no more Trotsky. It's like because it was always just a handful, I guess.
Right.
Coca-Cola or vodka. The future would be a boot, stamping on a human face forever.
It was a lesser of two evils. Thanks, Orwell.
Oh, god damn.
Hero Wars. I see this one the most.
Oh, all the time. You wonder. There must just be a lot of people willing to pay for those extras on those stupid mobile games, because I don't know how they afford
their
their
advertising budget is
It's gotta be
massive
through the roof.
because
crazy.
they're getting all of it. That
Mhm.
Hero Wars, and what bothers me is that half of them are always like this beautiful woman who is actually a monster.
Yeah.
It's just,
Oh, yes.
and it's just
these
like,
really
what's with
terrible
the sexism?
toxic trope.
I
Yeah,
mean,
right.
sometimes it's a
Is
little
this really
hot,
necessary?
but
I don't know.
at least that one was an ogre king. Ooh.
Oh, yeah.
It's just clicking. It's just fucking clicking on numbers. It's just
Right. Right.
like baby game. Sonic is more interactive.
Mm-hmm. You got me.
After the Second World War, it was widely accepted on the left that the capitalist class had overcome the internal contradictions within capitalism. In the book, Facing Reality, the collective of James Boggs
Did
and
it?
Castriatus
Did what?
That line there, it was assumed by the new left that capitalism had overcome its internal contradictions.
Oh yeah, no.
Which leads to capitalist realism, that there is no other, like, we have to deal with
The
the
system we got,
economy
we
as
have
it
to
is. We
meet
cannot
it.
work
Yeah.
to change it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how they came to that conclusion.
That's a good question,
because
yeah.
they went off the gold standard, and so I could read the writings and the books from the 60s, and I'm not seeing that argument being made that well. I think that it's still just taken as a given. It's
Right.
almost like they were brainwashed by capitalist propaganda as kids in the 50s, and didn't unlearn that.
Right.
Even the most radical people of the 60s, or the most radical, were like, no, we're revolutionary. We're going to try to change the economy. But the majority, the union membership, the people who benefited the New Deal coalition, they were like, no, social democracy is enough, but we need to make it more grassroots led, and that's the big reform. So the Great Society moves in that direction.
Right.
But then it's also cutting it at the same time, or it was an expansion actually. But then by the 70s, it's like, oh, we're out of money, and the finance and basically the banking sector basically said, no, we're powerful enough now. Now, with the boomed economy, we built up enough of our capital, our power, to basically shut this social democracy down. Literally,
essentially
5 years after the Great Society.
Wrote that fascism, corporate state, one-party state, welfare state, totalitarianism, all of these are ways in which rationalism attempts to adapt itself to the modern community. Therefore, it not only obstructs a new society, it destroys all the achievements of rationalism itself. To understand the full meaning of this quote, we should see it through the lens of the development of Kastriadis' thought and of his eventual rejection of Marx's critique of political economy.
Το 49 είναι μια στιγμή όπου αυτή η ομάδα και εγώ ο ίδιος θεωρούμε τον εαυτό μας μαρξιστές.
Τώρα.
Εγώ όχι, το έχω γράψει από το 64 ότι σήμερα μπαίνει το δίλημμα, είναι εξακολουθήσεις να είσαι μαρξιστής ή να είσαι επαναστάτης. Αλλά τα δύο μαζί είναι ασυμβίβαστα, ας πούμε. Γιατί ο μαρξισμός έχει γίνει κάτι τελείως διαφορετικό, είναι ένα νεκρό σώμα μιας ψευδοθεωρίας που δεν αναπτύσσεται και το οποίο κοινωνικά και ιστορικά λειτουργεί μόνο και μόνο σαν μια ιδεολογία, είτε για την νομιμοποίηση καθεστώτων εκμετάλλευσης και τρομοκρατίας όπως αυτά που υπάρχουν στις ανατολικές χώρες, είτε για την αναρρίχηση στην εξουσία ομάδων, οργανώσεων, κομμάτων σε υποανάπτυκτες χώρες και ότι αυτό το οποίο κάναμε εμείς στο σοσιαλισμό η βαρβαρότητα, και αν μου επιτρέπετε να πω αυτό το οποίο έκανα εγώ, αλλάζει κάτι σε αυτή την κατάσταση, δηλαδή προσέφερε στοιχεία για μια διαφορετική κατανόηση του κόσμου μέσα στον οποίο ζούμε, για μια διαφορετική κατανόηση των σκοπών μιας κοινωνικής αλλαγής, των τρόπων μιας κοινωνικής αλλαγής και για μια διαφορετική κατανόηση του ιστορικού κόσμου. Επί παραδείγματι, προσέφερε μια νομίζω τελείως διαφορετική κατανόηση και του προβλήματος της γραφειοκρατίας και του προβλήματος του μοντέρνου καπιταλισμού. Δηλαδή είμαστε οι μόνοι, είμαι ίσως ο μόνος ο οποίος από το 59-60 είπαμε και είπα ότι το πρόβλημα στη σύγχρονη δυτική ανεπτυγμένη καπιταλιστική κοινωνία δεν είναι το οικονομικό πρόβλημα. Δηλαδή δεν είναι το πρόβλημα της απαθλίωσης του προλεταριάτου, είτε σχετικής είτε απόλυτης, ότι το πρόβλημα είναι αλλού, το πρόβλημα είναι η ελευθερία των ανθρώπων μέσα στην παραγωγή, το πρόβλημα είναι στην καθημερινή του ζωή, το πρόβλημα είναι στην οικογένεια, το πρόβλημα είναι στην εκπαίδευση κτλ.
Here, Kastriadis is claiming that he was...
After doing bread theory for the amount of the year or so you've done it, what's your reaction to that conversation there? Well, what comes to mind?
Oops. Oh, shoot, drop stuff. Boy, I don't really know.
To say that, like, it's not an economic problem. But he didn't kind of say what the problem is, but that the problem is that there's a lack of freedom in production. I'm not sure. I guess you'd have to read his work to know what is he offering instead of Marxism. Like, what did the New Left offer when they kind of broke with Marx? Like, that's why there was an orthodox Marxism, which, as he says, has become the ideology of these powerful governments and whatever, or of those who are aspiring to be autocratic governments in the third world, like in Somalia,
Mhm.
in Ethiopia, where it crashed and burned. But like, what do they replace it with? Like, oh, we just have to do social movement stuff, basically. Work on the level of the social
Right.
movement, and not take power, not worry about the state, or at least not like try to use the state. It kind of there's a lot of course to learn from that, and it makes sense. But then it doesn't make sense in light of our lifetimes and the 70 years since. To me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course, every good book on the left is grappling with that. How do we take what is neo-Marxism these days? Well, you basically get co-op strategy. You get
Mhm.
the stuff from Richard Wolff and others,
Yeah.
and I went over. Thanks to Radical Reviewer, by the way, props to that channel. The David Harvey's 17 Contradictions of Capitalism.
Mhm.
And so I guess this is where David Harvey is a more classic Marxist, because he will go over the contradictions of capitalism and how, no, they haven't been solved.
Yeah.
Though
Absolutely have not.
he has multiple categories, though. There's the foundational ones that never are resolved, and there are the moving ones that are resolved decade to decade, but the contradictions change, right? The contradictions between bourgeoisie and proletariat have morphed into workers, service workers, professional workers, and then the billionaire class, or the fire sector, which are also PMC, but they're higher. They're the ones managing capitalism,
Right. Yeah.
and the petty bourgeois, of course. But we need better theories, and yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
always,
I
there's
do
always new
feel.
articles to explore that with.
Sure. Yeah.
Was original, when in fact he was only stating, in perhaps slightly different words, what the New Left Review was claiming, namely that the economic basis of totalitarian revolution was no longer to be taken as an article of faith, and that the struggle for freedom should move from the realm of productive work to the realm of the street, or to the bedroom, or to the lunch counter, or to the third world nations, and so on. The Frankfurt School philosophers also believed that capitalism as an economic system was sustainable. Pollock, who was the main contributor to the Frankfurt School on the level of economics, believed that state capitalism created a situation wherein the market no longer functioned as a governor of production, but where production and consumption were instead determined by the general plan. According to Pollock, there were no economic causes that could prevent a state capitalist government from raising the general standard of living. The only impediments against general prosperity were, according to him, political. And this was different from how
Except it still
Stalin
needs to
and Mao
exploit the
conceived
third
of.
world, though. So I think it more shifts the class struggle between, like, within the country to between countries.
Developed and developing.
To make it a nature of imperialism, which I think the Frankfurt School kind of didn't have, which is why you have post-colonial theory.
Mhm.
Like, you have these other schools that are split from Marxism to fill in the gaps of the Frankfurt and the other post or mid-modern Marxist or post-Marxist, where they're just rethinking they have to. Capitalism did survive the two world wars. It didn't,
Right.
collapse in itself, but it did morph into state capitalism. And what is it morphed into now? Is China still state capitalist? We call it that most of the time. Do we not call America state capitalist? We don't, because it's so much free market / billionaire capitalist ruled. And yet the economy is only stable and surviving and limping from Boom the Bust because of the role of the Fed and the Treasury, and there is a plan as far
That's true.
as
Yeah.
trying to manage
Essentially
where the
playing to
capital
economy.
goes.
Yeah.
We see it on the state level and as well as the national sometimes, but it's mostly state by state, and this is the experiment of America, in that New York, Massachusetts, and maybe Minnesota is now competing to see where the capital will flow to develop the AI industry.
Oh, yes.
New York is getting a jump on that, and Hochul in her State of the State, that's our governor, by the way, put in her State of the State, like, we're going to dominate the AI industry in the world. And, she used the word dominate. We're going to dominate the world in AI.
Great.
Not with AI, but like just in AI.
In AI, yeah.
Being the industry. But key framing there, or like rethink that the way you would say that. Basically, our economy in New York is going to keep growing based on the AI industry. It's the hottest, basically, the thing to build off of big data. As that's developed, because big data, it's not bringing in the returns it used to.
Right.
Now it's just hero wars to advertise based on that, or Palmon.
Yeah.
Wait, is it called Palmon or
Pal World?
Pal World? Pals.
Yeah.
That's right. They're pals.
Pals. Yeah. They're not Pokemon.
It's such like a made up It's like Pokemon. It's like made up.
Pokemon.
It's such a Pokemon spoof.
Yeah.
Like from Mad Magazine.
Oh, absolutely.
The pals. Collect all pals.
Yeah. Even the designs of many of these monsters are.
That's fine. Pokemon designs, there are some memes. Actually, the memes are more about people complaining that Pal World's copying Pokemon, when Pokemon was very much copying in its designs Dragon Warrior and earlier RPGs.
Oh, sure. Yes.
So
these are not high concept ideas to begin with,
Yes.
Anthropomorphized.
But this is as Pokemon's been running out of steam, so to speak, creatively.
Yeah.
But not like I've cared about it
fair.
since I bought Diamond, but I didn't finish it because I just lost interest. I'm like, I don't really care about this. This is a kid's game, and no amount of nostalgia is going to make me help.
Right.
Like I can't force myself to enjoy this, because guess what? My nostalgia of playing Pokemon was on a Game Boy, in a car, just passing time.
There you go. And I think
it was
that's
a time passer for me.
Right.
It wasn't really because it was exciting, actually.
Sure. Yeah.
Part of it was
a lot
actually
of
for
it
so many
just...
other people, and I would really be left out if I didn't. So, yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Sorry to my geeky friends who still buy every Pokemon or something.
No, yeah, I bought Purple again because my kids were really into it for a couple of weeks. And my
a couple of weeks. So they only like something for a couple of weeks, huh?
Oh, there's so much out there with Steam.
Yeah, right.
And just so much stuff that you can just get on demand. Like,
it's not like there's seasonal wait times where you'd have to wait till the end of the year before there'd be new games.
Right. Yeah,
or there'd be a summer release schedule and
sure, and then the Christmas release. But yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, Violet was just so boring. Like it's the thinnest plot, but there was so much dialogue that went along with it.
This is the new 3D one, right?
Yeah, the open world.
Open world.
Like,
but it's empty, right? They look so empty. Like they're being open world games from the aughts.
Right. There are Pokemon and stuff wandering around, but it's populated with NPCs basically.
Yeah.
And I just could not care at all about the main storyline or doing the quests. It all just seemed tedious. It was not fun. So yeah, I'd say you're right. That they've just kind
unfortunately
of
most RPGs feel that way to me, unless it's some strategy RPG.
There's some really good ones. Like I remember growing up, the Super Mario RPG on the SNES was pretty good. But yeah, a lot of them
have a ROM for it. I just have to sit. If I ever see, that's the thing. Even if I had a whole month off, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't just sit down with all the media that I could catch up with. Yeah. I would feel compelled to do social things and fill the time with other things that I just, I would be going out hiking or something. I don't know.
Sure. Right. All right. Well, let's get back to the video. Let's finish it off.
Of socialism, only in so much as Pollock was critical of state capitalism, or what Stalin and Mao would call socialism, because of the limits on freedom that it required. But what the Frankfurt School, Stalin, and Mao all agreed on was that the contradictions within capitalist economics could be overcome through the use of the state. And once the state could overcome capitalism, the need for a revolutionary working class could no longer be seen.
Why is rowing with hydro the best workout for you?
But you have to think, is that what happened with the New Left? That the working class wasn't going to be revolutionary because state capitalism or social democracy had overcome a number of the contradictions, not all of them, of course. It intensifies others, though.
I'm just not sure. I mean, aside from building up a little bit of a welfare state for a bit there, what has it really done to undo any of the contradictions? Like even in terms of like gestures that, we can say that we've defeated what? Like they haven't tackled the profit motive. They haven't tackled what Marx called the anarchy of the market.
Yeah, maybe this is where the post-left comes in, or at least this is what justifies it being a post-left, in that since, do you think do the contradictions really matter? Do they lead to these ruptures?
I think they matter.
Revolutionary classes and whatever. That's why, like, I find post-leftists to be the ultimate kind of defeatist / cynics. It's out of a cynicism that nothing has worked in the 20th century. There was no successes whatsoever. It was all bad. It was all shit. It all looks like all the music sounds like shit except for my music. And other post-leftists.
I don't think that's true either. Like it seemed to me, and like I've not studied this super extensively, but as the revolutions went on around the world, the later it was, the more complete of a revolution tended to be carried out. So, I mean, start with Soviet Union, which considerably backpedaled once Stalin got power. But then you have China, which continues to go strong, but has a lot of state control still. And then you have, your Vietnam, your Thailand,
and hasn't overcome many of the contradictions of capital. I mean, that's sort of right. Each of their 5-year plans are kind of about like, well, how are we going to shift around contradictions this time?
Yeah.
Each of their 10-year meetings are about like, okay, what contradiction are we facing up right now that's really like right in front of us, which would be like the real estate market in the last cycle. Sure. And this cycle, it's what is it? What do they say? I think it's more about getting the corruption out. Trying to get. Well, does it mean it's not making workplaces more democratic, but trying to, as I covered it, they're trying to put more party functionaries in businesses so that they're following the rules. So, but do the rules mean like don't care about cost cutting so much? Because that's how they've gotten ahead, but it means that everything they make is shit, or at least worse. It's serviceable, but only based on it being the lowest price, which means maximum exploitation. This is just what comes up when I talk to the more normal people about like, well, if you go to Taiwan for a product, they actually ask you like, how good do you want it, versus if you go to China, a Chinese producer, they're going to go like, well, how cheap do you want it? That kind of thing.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, especially since the gutting of unions in the late 70s, early 80s, I can't see. I mean, it just seems like it's been a backward slide for.
Well, the gutting of the unions was also just a byproduct to me of in the 50s unions becoming business unions.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
they lost any radical character, so they could do nothing but decline.
right. And that's not wrong,
or
but
acquiesce and be part of the power structure, and
yeah.
thus get all the bad reputations they rightfully deserved.
But that still leaves me wondering, like, what are these contradictions that they thought
We're being overcome.
these states were being overcome? Like, I mean, sure, if you look at Cuba, I mean, they've gotten to a point where there's no homelessness, that everyone has high quality health care. They did a certain amount of land reform. So from that point of view, I don't know how you characterize Cuba's economy, because it's not exactly.
Well, no, as long as the embargo's in effect, it's still in a state of underdevelopment.
Sure,
it's depending. It's just what the state and the government has chosen to focus on with their economic planning. It's still not very rich, but it's.
But they've managed to tackle a lot of the
as much as they can so far. And this is where capital comes in. Like, development follows capital, and if you don't get capital infusions from somewhere else, you know, and the Europe got it through stealing gold and slaves and imperialism. How does a moral society develop itself? How does it do capital formation? Now, of course, that's the old question. The question now is, at least because I started reading Howard Kunstler again, because I bought a book of his last year or so ago. Capital formation is basically impossible now. Or in the capital formation, well, actually, here's where he's kind of limited. Capital formation in the 20th century and 21st century, or at least in the 20th century, has depended on cheap energy. You know, the coming of fossil fuel economies.
Yeah.
With that waning, because we are past peak oil, no matter how much gas is being pumped out. Without cheap energy, we cannot accumulate new capital. Any capital growth we have now is fictitious. It's through debt or whatever. This is the tack he's taking. So he kind of says, like, there was a window 20, 30 years ago where we could have rebuilt our infrastructure, done high-speed rail, and done all the things to kind of have a modern economy. But that window passed. So without new capital, which we don't have and can't be created, we can only degrowth now. We can only slide down to a low energy, no matter what kind of energy, future. And that's how you get his novels of, like, you know, we're back to agrarian societies.
The world made by hand novels he did. Yeah.
It's an interesting point of view. It's definitely a very cynical one, but he does grapple accurately that solar and wind and sometimes hydro is still fossil fuel energy. You cannot build these energy sources without cheap fossil fuel energy.
Right. We cannot have a one-to-one replacement of our entire energy economy.
No. But I do like I think he does recognize that, you know, you can have some local hydropower and you can light your homes with that, at least.
Sure. Yeah.
But big industrial economy or you know, that's the scale of it. It's not going to be through our D- energy grid, which again we could have fixed a decade or two ago for the price of $1 trillion, but now it's going to take $2 trillion, and that's just capital that just doesn't exist. But he's taking it from the point of view of we're too much in debt, we can never borrow that money, and no one will ever hold that debt. But he's kind of ignoring the creation or the capitalist realism of, like, if we did make them enough capital to use, we would be, you know, creating an inflationary bubble or whatever.
Yeah.
But again, it's not, capitalists won't allow this. So it's sort of like, he's definitely not, he is a curmudgeon conservative. He is not a lefty. No, like he's anti-left, which is the kind of odd thing about it, that he sees how shit everything is, but he also, being a boomer, I guess, just sees anything left-wing as being, well, totalitarian and leading that direction. We're trying to solve this issue with the fiction of trying to do state capitalism, but without any capital. because the capital depends on. We can't even go back to. We can't build any new social democracy because back then in mid-century, it depended on how cheap oil was. And as soon as we and he sees it, and it's one of the things that happened in '72. That's when the U.S. hit peak oil.
Right.
That's why we had. You could look at it that way if you're just an oil or fossil fuel archivist like him, or an activist, and you don't see capitalism as a broader thing, but if you just see it as an energy economy, then when we hit peak oil, that's when we had to go off the gold standard, and that's when our economy officially stopped growing, and no longer could grow without finding something to fill in that value that fossil fuels were bringing in. Now, I was linking them together in my college years, capitalism and fossil fuel economies.
Right.
But some activists like Bill McKibben and other bastions of green capitalism,
right,
they don't tie them together. They just see it as energy economies, not a capitalist economy, using cheap energy. Well, because the Soviet Union, I guess, needed cheap oil too, or something. But that's why they built all the dams and nuclear plants. They weren't going to be dependent on fossil fuel. Their energy wasn't cheap, and that's why they lag behind. That's a question, though.
Yeah, that'd definitely be an open question. Huh. All right. Well, let's move on.
By 1956, the dream of liberation brought about by a so-called dictatorship of the proletariat, a proletarian state guided by a communist party made up of the most progressive elements of the working class and the best of an intellectual vanguard, was, if not entirely dead, very sick. Instead of continued political and military struggles, instead of support for Uncle Joe and Chairman Mao, there was a move to develop a new left. A left that could take up the challenge of not only overcoming the capitalists and the bourgeoisie, but also the bureaucratic state formations, including bureaucratic social democracy. This new left would not restrict itself to organizing the working class to fight for socialism, but would intervene in current events and take up the problems of society, such as the threat of nuclear war, the monopolization and possible democratization of the communications industries, and the effect of popular culture on the ethics and imaginations of the people. In 1957, Mao claimed that those moved by the Hungarian uprising, those tempted to be politically sympathetic with its aims, were either revisionist counter-revolutionaries or dupes. Even though Mao had already moved away from a strictly working-class revolutionary politics and embraced the notion of the people as a multi-class formation, he saw the international New Left as a threat from the West. Meanwhile, the New Left, while wanting to break free from Marxist or Stalinist orthodoxy, allowed itself a Maoist undercurrent. And today, Western Marxists, people like Badiou and Zizek, also dabble in or outright embrace a westernized Maoism. So why are there so many techies today? For the same reason that there are so many social democrats. We all mostly believe that the state can overcome the contradictions within capitalist economics. After the economic crisis of the 70s and the consequent shift from Fordism to neoliberalism, the left continued to believe in state capitalism as a force that could reconcile the economic contradictions within capitalism, as we told ourselves that neoliberalism should be understood as a primarily political project. In order to suppress all the various people's movements, in order to stop women from getting liberation, for instance, and in general, in order to squelch the demand for freedom from below, the politicians had smashed labor and immiserated their own constituencies. After the economic crisis of 2008, we continued on believing that the foundation of capitalist society, the capitalist-worker relation, could endure without immiseration if the state regulated the banks, or if the state mandated that businesses pay higher wages, or if we made sure everyone had universal health care. Being a tanky today is a way to both reject the idea that capitalism is a natural limit in the world and to hold on to that idea. It's a way to say no to the United States and to the market and to Coca-Cola, while still saying yes to the only alternative that the left has any theory about or experience with. It's a way to hold on to state capitalism.
So what do you think of that conclusion? And the good faith tankies online, not just
right. Yeah, we're not talking about
the Yankee tanky,
Maupin and
the transphobes,
Jackson Hinkle, and all
who are
those.
really quite
Yes.
conspiratorial. They're really like they really see like the conspiracy of kings in neoliberal policy, and anything that capital has expropriated, whether it be feminism, gay rights,
right,
et cetera, et cetera. Anything good in the world, really. So
basically,
left,
those folks just worship the power aesthetic that they see from the former Soviet Union, and that's about as far as their politics go usually. But yeah, no, like the good faith ones. Why there are so many so-called tankies? Yeah, I think part of that is true. They just, I guess, instead of a capitalist realism, it would be a state capitalist realism that this is all we've been able to accomplish in the past. So this is all we can really hope for.
So let's try it again.
What's that?
Yeah. I said let's try it again.
So let's try it again. Let's
but with computers.
Right.
And the technologies we have, and with the internet particularly.
Yeah.
Because they had computers, but they didn't have good, microprocessors and internet.
Right. But I think another element, though, is an element of just regular capitalist realism. The idea that you look at capitalism, you look at these gigantic transnational corporations, you listen to the sorts of things that these billionaires believe, and it's like we live on different planets already. Their world is just so different. The amount of power that they've accumulated is just so vast, and the only
concerns
thing
are totally different.
Yeah, right. But I think the only thing that they can conjure up to ever take on such a behemoth is another very strong centralized power structure. And I mean,
well, that's the only thing we can fight them with. You mean?
Right? Exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to take a giant to slay another giant. I think there's definitely
or we need a better sling shot.
Yeah, right. But it's getting harder and harder to imagine what that.
Or we pick at the feet of the giant.
Yeah.
And then the giant feels that itch, and then they shift their foot and squash us. Because the giant doesn't even have to. The giant here is like, let's say, capitalist class. They don't even have to directly attack. They can just. They don't have to give any order for its functionaries to act the way they do, to say like, oh, this is a threat to me, not the billionaires even, but me. I own $3 million of real estate assets, people.
Right?
Or the middle landlords of the local who live locally but collect, with one selfless loan, they collected all these rental units and so on. In fact, there was a guy locally. His firm was called like the Jerusalem Rentals, and I think he's changed the name now. Actually,
Jerusalem Rentals. Yeah, I imagine so. So I guess I don't blame that point of view. The system is vast that we're coming up against, but at the same time, I don't know. I always come back to it. It feels like a better strategy is to every system has to have a weakness, and in the case of capitalism, especially modern capitalism, there's a lot of weaknesses, but it's the constant need for inputs, the fact that it has to grow or else it dies.
Its
It disrupts
weaknesses
some
are those
supply.
contradictions. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like look what's happening with the Houthis and blocking the Suez Canal. That's disrupted the entire global exchange network with just one simple act. So there's a lot of pressure points that make capitalism vulnerable. It's super
Yeah.
strong,
With as a speaker,
but
in Nouveau Media put it, it's not that they're using low tech; they're actually using high tech, but it's cheap.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
cheap
right,
enough now.
yeah,
And his comment, which struck me, was like, throughout all of human history, if you wanted to economically blockade another nation state,
mhm,
you needed a navy.
right.
The
And to
Houthis have just done it
actually
without
surround
a
their
navy. This is a
right,
completely new state of things where a non-NGO, non-governmental actor, the Houthi military,
hmm,
they're not even a nation state.
right,
They they have enacted an economic blockade
right.
uh, with what they have available, and
Well,
that
and
and when you think about how expensive that like to have economic power globally, you needed a big navy, and that's what has made America the hegemon. Is that and whoever has the biggest navy, they are spending more than they could ever take in. It's what killed the British Empire. It's what's killing our empire. Our
mhm,
navy is, in fact, the largest expense. It includes all the planes and
for
whatever
no
too,
damn good
but
reason either.
it's
Like
the all the bases and all of our empire is really just to support our navy.
it's ridiculous.
And it's the navy that allows us to be world police and allows us to it allows there to be global trade. Um, I think there's always been a thinking in the geopolitical, classes that like the one I took, that in the future with multipolarity, it has to be more of a community responsibility.
Mm,
Like instead of being one superpower, the ideal is every country puts in. I mean, again, if everyone's kind of agreeing, but let's say the security risks are not coming from nation states anymore, as they aren't, that every nation state's putting into the UN, so it's a UN Navy. So it's one large navy, probably the size of the US's, but
yeah,
now it's shared by the entire global
shared by everybody.
economy
Sure.
instead of just ours,
Uh-huh.
as the major actor. Because when I think about how like China hasn't overcome contradictions, like even when when the Chinese government CCP worries about their population numbers, that they had a lower birth rate, their birth, yeah, I think it was their sheer numbers have
Hmm.
gone down to another 200 million in the
Mm.
last few years. Like their birth rate dropped
Yeah, yeah,
by 40, like a 20% or something.
yeah, yeah,
Don't quote my numbers,
yeah.
but it went
A
down.
large amount. Yeah.
And they're not, and it's the same reason that we're not having as many children. It's just not economically viable. There's not a economic future, that we're not prosperous enough to have enough to support children. So we're choosing, since we're able to birth control, not have less kids.
Right.
And we're not marrying, and thus the birth control doesn't even factor in. We're having less sex, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And that's happening in China too. And the CCP also doesn't know what to do about it. And they're the super scary totalitarian state, and they can't force millennials to have kids, just as our government can't. They're
Right.
not even the closest we're getting is that I saw the headline that LA is starting. They're going to roll out the baby box that the Scandinavian countries have. But again, the Scandinavian country rolled out the baby box decades ago, and it's not like their populations are growing,
No.
minus migration, but hey,
Right.
whatever. So it's not all white anymore. It changes what the definition of a Swede or an American is.
Mhm.
Deal with it.
Yeah. Right.
I like this one like Marxist or whatever who was like in a thousand years ago, there were these people called the Celts, and they don't exist anymore. And in 1,000 years from now, there will be no Irish left.
Right.
What does that matter? What's the moral like good or bad to that?
Yeah.
There'll be another group of people.
It's just the
or
ebb
a
and
different
flow.
ethnic group.
There'll be other cultures that come in, and
Exactly. It's like food places. A place closes, we go, oh, that's too bad.
right.
And then the
Something
next
else
year
comes
there'll
in.
be a new restaurant that could be just as good or even better.
Even better. Can be a new favorite. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. We should.
And this is in this place in Albany. The oldest restaurant that was 111 years old just closed. Named Jack's, and they're the Oyster House. That's how old they are. They were Jack's Oyster House.
Oh, Jack's Oyster.
Just meaning it's a seafood place, but for the upper class,
Sure.
And and they seem to they survived the pandemic, but they closed this year.
Yeah.
Last year, surprising everyone. But you have owners that are probably pretty sus.
I see.
And people are like, yeah, they're overrated. I had my bar mitzvah there.
Did you?
Yeah, with the luncheon, not
at a place that serves shellfish of all places.
Well, they had the pillows of salmon. That's what sold me. Pillows of salmon.
Pillows of salmon.
They're not a whole steak, but it was like this big.
A big chunk,
so
yeah.
You get a chunk this big, like sushi size, really, but cooked.
Sure.
Just
funny.
But a lot of other nice dishes too. Well, they do more than seafood. It's like surf and turf. You get steak. Or,
sure. No, I know.
The last time I ate there, I got scallops.
Scallops.
Because I could actually get full sea scallops.
Oh yeah. Few things better than full size scallops.
Melt in your mouth.
Melt in your mouth.
Yeah. Let's see. What else to talk about? I mean, so most of my other videos, unfortunately, I think I thought I kept saving. Well, I have saved things, but they just don't track with. One's about the dirtbag left. It's longer. We're not going to do another video, right? But
yeah, we won't really have time for
thinking about
a whole new one. It's not a lot.
Talk more about what I'm
real
reading, but
I mean, if we were
what I'm going to read next is I'm going to finish Abolish the Family.
Sure, we could do the Puerto Rican one if we kept the.
I don't have to talk about that. That can speak for itself.
Okay.
It's basically like community
because that does
property stuff.
So yeah, if you want to do that, we can pull it up.
There are a lot of abandoned buildings in Puerto Rico. It's not pretty and it's a real problem for communities. Some say you have to invite wealthy investors who have the money to buy these properties and hopefully fix them.
Investors, this is what opportunity looks like. That's opportunity. That one, big one.
The trade-off is they'll profit off them.
Have you ever walked into a house and it smells like cat pee really bad? You know what that smells like to me? Money, baby, money.
Okay, you pause.
Others
briefly.
disagree with that approach.
Just a quick thing. I forgot to say it before, but when you were saying how miserable you are being unemployed, when even in college, I was thinking like this: like the only thing worse than being exploited is not being exploited.
Just have no one even want to.
And I was thinking about this in college. Like the only thing worse than not getting a job in the sector was getting a job in the sector, because I'm looking at all the negatives and kind of focusing on it. But I'm not also thinking about like, if I don't get a job in the sector, I'm kind of consigning myself to completely like nothing. Like, what would I be doing? Service jobs. So I'm like, oh, yeah, I would be serving coffee or whatever. I wouldn't get that job, but I would get something like it. And similarly with property, like with capitalism, and the only thing worse than capital investment, gentrification, is to not be gentrified, because then your neighborhood stays
you're totally
poor
neglected.
and shitty, and no one has any money to paint anything, or renovate anything. Albany's stable enough because of state employment and hospitals.
Sure,
there's enough people getting paid something that it's just frosting on the cake to have a tech sector where you have people actually getting paid like $60,000 at a startup to do geoforce tracking or whatever. I meet people who come in and they work for a startup. They sound pretty bland and unexcited about it because they probably know that they're going to be out of here in 2 years, but they're looking around anyway. Okay, I'm done.
Parásito en este país son los inversionistas.
They say the investors coming in are gentrifying their communities and displacing them.
Que hay una intención de abandonar el país para que vengan otros a comprar y a sacarnos de aquí.
And they say the people already living there need these spaces to grow food, for housing, to provide services to their neighbors. So they're occupying them.
Son momentos urgentes y requieren medidas urgentes y nosotros las vamos a tomar.
They're not asking for permission. They're going in, cleaning these spaces, making use of them, and in some cases they get to keep them.
Estos espacios son nuestros, que este territorio nos pertenece y que lo vamos a desarrollar como nosotros entendamos que podemos desarrollarlo.
This story is about Puerto Ricans illegally occupying land and buildings to fight displacement.
Cuando pasó el huracán María, esta comunidad pasó por muchos lugares en Puerto Rico que los vecinos nos empezamos a conocer. No sabíamos qué iba a pasar, veíamos todo destrozado y muchos de los vecinos, o sea, nos dimos la mano, o sea, cocinábamos.
What happened next is what tends to happen when communities get together. They start conspiring about how to make their neighborhood better. They set their eyes on the piece of land next to this vacant
Conspiracy
house.
of the people.
Arnaldo says it was
Conspiracy of Kings.
Ooh, that's a cool sounding quote. What's that from?
Well, it's from the Occult Features of Anarchism.
Okay.
That it's actually part of the subtitle, on the Conspiracy of Kings and the Conspiracy of the People.
Oh, okay. Very cool.
was full of clutter.
Este espacio era un espacio que estaba totalmente abandonado. Daba hasta miedo. Entramos ilegalmente y limpiamos el espacio.
Then they started thinking of the possibilities, and they came up with the idea of growing food on this land. They figured it's what they needed most, especially after what they had just been through with Hurricane Maria.
Yo tuve vecinos que se fueron a buscar comida, a ver si conseguían comida en algún fast food o algo, y llegaban y no, sin comer nada.
This time they did ask for permission from the owner, a woman who had inherited the house from her mother.
Y ella le motivó la idea, le gustó, sí, me han vuelto, metan mano.
What followed were a couple of years of a lot of work to transform this space.
Llegaba gente de todas partes, o sea, no solamente gente de la comunidad, a hacer este sueño realidad.
They managed to turn this into this.
Okay there, TikTok video.
They collected their neighbors' food waste and used it to grow crops.
Yo me siento orgulloso de decir que pude hasta cosechar brócoli.
Then they would share the harvest.
Club music, like maybe it's just the genre of music. I just do not like this genre of music.
No.
It's not. It's too abrasive to be club music.
Well, it's got that kind of, but at the same time, it has that kind of that shooting for a sort of corporate promotional video, like just enough to keep your attention, but not, I don't know.
But not enough to distract your attention.
Not enough to distract you.
Because it's not actually good. It's not good enough to actually like, oh, this is catchy. I'm going to listen to this.
Right.
But then turn it down.
Right. It does not have to be
Why is it so loud?
In between segments here.
Anyway, we're just critiquing the Real News Network style here.
Todo lo que nos sobraba lo regalábamos a la comunidad.
They had events, school field trips. It became a meeting point for the community. And then they found out someone had bought the land, an investor from New York. Lucy lives next door. Her cousin was the owner of the house.
Yo hice una lista de las personas que querían comprarlo y se la di a ella.
Lucy says there were several neighbors interested in buying the house and the land. When they found out her cousin had sold it to an outside investor for $125,000, the community was not happy.
Puedo decir nombre, pero hay una que la llamó y le dio un insulto por teléfono que...
This changed things. Now they were occupying a piece of land that belonged to someone who had different plans for the space.
La intención de él era comprar mi casa, comprar esta, comprar la de toda la cuadra.
She told them she wasn't selling, and so did the other neighbors.
Él ha venido a ofrecer por encima que él tiene pensado construir un edificio aquí, como Ciudadela.
This is Ciudadela.
No estoy en contra del progreso y que abran cosas y que la ciudad crezca, pero también hace falta espacios como este. La gente tiene una noción bien equivocada porque es el progreso. El progreso no es cemento, no es edificio, no es construcción. El progreso puede ser agricultura.
The investor is David Kingsley. He declined to speak to me on camera, but the community says he hasn't tried to kick them out. Instead, he agreed to rent the land to them for $1 a month, just to have it on paper, until he decides what to do with it. Arnaldo says the community wants to collectively buy the space.
Hay algo bien bonito que puede pasar aquí y se puede dar y puede ser un ejercicio para no solamente a Santurce, sino para
collectively buying it from the woman. That way they didn't have
to
but
But,
I
like-
guess it didn't occur. They were too busy setting up the garden. I
That
guess.
was a bit confusing too. Like she said that the neighbor owned the house. Did he not own the land on it that it was on too, or?
No, it said that her cousin was the
Cousin.
person, and the cousin's obviously not showing her face. She dipped out.
Gotcha. I just wonder
But, like,
how.
why would she do that while this big community project was there that she gave permission to? So
Right.
you gotta give permission and then just like say, oh no, actually I changed my mind. I'm gonna take this payout.
Right.
That's kind of a dick move.
Para el resto de Puerto Rico.
In the
But
meantime,
I'm
the
not a poor
uncertainty has
Puerto
dampened.
Rican, so
What's that?
I'm not a bereft Puerto Rican,
That is true.
so I'll shut up.
The mood. The community has backed off from putting so much effort into a space they might lose. But Arnaldo hopes they can pick it back up and return it to its glory days.
Yo personalmente comí muchas cosas aquí y bien orgulloso. Vamos a ver qué pasa en el huerto.
Hey everybody, look at this. I'm in love, and I don't care who knows it.
The investors buying in places like Santurce are attracted by very generous tax breaks.
I paid $1.4 million in income tax, and I said, never again, we're going to Puerto Rico.
There's the tax break that only applies to investors moving to Puerto Rico, not locals. There are tax credits for investing in tourism development.
We love these small little guest houses because they're easy to run, produce massive, massive cash flows.
And there's a 15-year tax exemption for new development in distressed areas. 98% of Puerto Rico has been declared distressed.
Only in Puerto Rico, guys. This is absolutely the dream scenario.
The government argues this will bring much-needed investment.
Look at this beauty in Rio Piedras.
But in some cases, investors are buying properties and just sitting on them.
We paid $24,000 for it, and we did nothing to it, flipped it for $65,000, and they've done nothing to it, and now it's probably worth about $200,000. Go figure.
Es más lo que se llevan que lo que dejan. Porque si no, no fuese un negocio.
I reached out to all the investors you've seen in the...
What a genius business.
I think that clip, that needs to be a meme right there.
Right.
That like we
Did
we
nothing
did
to it.
nothing.
Just
I'm
admit
proud that I did
upfront.
nothing. The next person, 65,000, they did nothing, and now it's listed for 200,000, and because nothing was done. That's what I mean when I say like there's fake value here. It's like, oh, this high value market, all this money being generated. Like, what's it being generated off of? It's only getting it's only being paid for from banks making the money via loans that aren't going to be able to be like, will they be paid back? There's enough growth of incomes
You gotta
that
figure
people
someone's
can
gonna be
pay
left.
for Airbnbs, I guess, that this cash
Right.
flow is coming, right?
I guess. I don't
There's
know.
work
It
being
does
done.
seem like a, speculation bubble for sure. Especially that rate, what was it, 20
That
to
rate of
40
increase.
to 60 to like 200,000, 300,000.
But that's how you get these inner city like these properties, houses. They go from 50 grand to 100 grand to 150 grand.
Yeah.
And they should have stayed at 50 because they need 100,000 of renovation.
Right.
But it's like, oh yeah, but now once you start renting this baby, you'll be bringing in enough for 300,000. So
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, if I'm massively exploitative landlord,
Sure.
or if I'm a slumlord, but I don't want to be a slumlord. So your pricing structure doesn't fit with any alternative morality than no morality or amorality.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the
These
market.
clips, but none of them agreed to an on-camera interview.
Vienen a extraer y lo saben, y lo saben.
Giovanni Roberto is part of a group that occupied this building in Caguas after Hurricane Maria. People were hungry and comedores sociales needed a place to feed them. They found this building that appeared to be abandoned, but with a lot of potential for what they wanted to do. So they broke the lock and went in. He says what they found inside was disgusting.
Muchos cubículos, madera, cucarachas, ratones, mucho gato también.
They started cleaning, fixing, and cooking. They say they've served more than 100,000 plates of food since the hurricane. By 2022, they had invested almost $120,000 between repairs, solar panels, kitchen equipment. But 4 years in, no one had come by to claim the building. So they started searching for the title holder and found it was an LLC connected to a real estate company called Morgan Reed.
La primera comunicación fue para dejarnos saber ellos que sabían que estábamos invadiendo el espacio y que con esa claridad nos estaban dando un tiempo para resolver el asunto. O me arrendas o te saco en 30 días, facilito. Así fue la comunicación. Nosotros con mucha dignidad, con mucha temple, dijimos, no, nosotros venimos a sentarnos a negociar porque este espacio nos pertenece a nosotras.
My name is Brian Tannenbaum. I'm the regional director of the Morgan Reed Group here in Puerto Rico.
Morgan Reed is the same company connected to the purchase of the Oceanfront School in San Juan that I told you about in this video. Brian Tannenbaum is one of the executives of the company, and the person Comedores Sociales says they had to negotiate with.
Él decía, ustedes tienen suerte de que yo estoy enfocándome.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, there's a man who doesn't fear much in the world.
That's the whitest possible man.
But geez, in any just society, those people that invested all of that stuff would just be given the deed.
120 grand, that's probably the price of it.
Absolutely. And even if it's not,
but they're not going to sell to them because they probably, oh yeah, that's worth something. I'll rent it down.
Right. And
that's funny how until that point they couldn't find, it wasn't claimed by anyone. They had to seek them out, and once they
had to
found
find
them,
it, and
okay, you're
then
there.
Once they found it, it's
all
like,
right,
oh,
yeah,
I can exploit you. Okay,
where's my rent? Money, please.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but at some point you have to say, what are society's priorities? Are they to have activated spaces and good use of infrastructure, or is it just to prop up these silly laws that only benefit?
It's so disheartening
the worst people.
I mean, it's what we're facing, that like neoliberal governments, when it's all Democrat even, their main priority is getting investment capital. Because that's what makes you a winner. That's what makes you a prosperous community, is there being capital investment.
Right.
And so anything that would disrupt that is a threat and a danger. So I suppose the double standard now is that double standard of, you have Democrats that talk of community and, look at all the great work that nonprofits do and whatever. But if it ever disrupt real estate, they would, the knives come out,
right.
or the support ends. And I'm wondering to see how long it goes with the United Tenants of Albany, because they're organizing, they're working for rent stabilization, just little reforms like that. It's not, but rent control is what got Castro on the U.S.'s shit list. That was his first big crime.
Yeah, all the land
was rent control in Havana. That's what made him an enemy of the state and all that's good in the world, and an authoritarian. He was fine until then. That's what's so funny about it. And you'll see that dynamic play out. So it's just like, but when the knives come out, that doesn't mean everyone sees them for what they are. You still have to educate people on how, look, the fire sector, that's finance, insurance, real estate, they're the ones that the government serves. And that's not you. But I guess enough people maybe are, or they feel like they are, or, well, I do have insurance and I don't want to lose that. I don't want to disrupt that, because if something bad happens to the insurance industry, then my rates will go up and that'll hurt or something like that. Like, they really see it backwards like that. Like, no, absolutely, you can be free from this. But granted, my colleagues at work, they're all higher paid than me and whatever. They're rich enough to pay all of these insurances, like life insurance, house insurance, whatever. It's like, I don't pay any of that shit, by choice or because I'm not required to yet. But I'm sure if I own a house, maybe you can tell me you're required to own this insurance and that insurance. And that's just feeding the beast. That's like, and that's how they secure their monopoly, by making it the law. There's nothing greatest than a law or some requirement that forces a population to pay for your product. And we're supposed, and the socialists are the monsters who want to put people in a box.
Right. Yeah.
But that's how it gets turned around, where what they're doing, that's the socialism. It's corporate communism, which is what the worst tankies say. when they say like no, we are in a communist country, corporate communist. They actually, I was listening to Rick, no, what's his, Alex Richer or something.
Okay.
And he's just a little small time streamer like yourself. And he went into a Discord chat with the Yankee Tanky and 2 others, and they called him gay. They don't believe in studies. They don't they really are sophicists. But they'll do the thing where it's like, the people of Palestine, they're not supporters of the gay agenda, and so you're being a colonialist when you're for gay rights, essentially.
So brain dead. Oh my God. Wow.
Anyway, very entertaining, but also.
Oh yeah, they're good for some entertainment, but
scary. They're
just
scary.
being around them long enough, and you just start feeling disgusting about the world and yourself. And
but this is a bro as well, so he's a good. He can, he was having a good time.
Yeah.
Throwing it back at them, and they hated him. Oh, they were pausing him, all like yelling at him.
Oh yeah,
because he would demand it's a different thing, obviously.
Sure. All right, well, let's see if we can finish up this last few minutes of it.
En Santurce y en Viejo San Juan, que todavía no me interesa Cagua. Un poco como que gracias a la gentrificación que estoy bregando allá o el desplazamiento que estoy bregando allá, ustedes tienen más chance de sobrevivir.
The corporation bought the building in 2015 for $108,000. They sat on it for 7 years and we're now selling it for more than triple. Comedores Sociales didn't have that kind of money, but they've kept using the building anyway. Once a month, they give out free groceries to more than 150 families in Caguas. They have free weekly acupuncture and massages for the community, ping pong for the youth, and they host a market where they sell produce at a low cost. They're trying to bring life to an urban center that looks like this.
Yo recuerdo cuando yo me mudo para aquí, que mi mamá me dice, ¿pero qué tú estás haciendo? Si el casco urbano no sirve, eso está todo apagado, es inseguro, te pueden matar, te pueden asaltar.
Omar says all the abandonment drives people away. That's why his group is also occupying buildings. Urba Vieja has now claimed 8 spaces.
Nosotros vinimos a darle valor a toda esta comunidad que parecía que no lo tuviese.
They have turned what used to be abandoned buildings into an art gallery, a secondhand clothing boutique, a museum, a theater, and a food garden. And they have already identified a couple dozen more spaces they want to acquire by 2030.
Si no ocupamos, si nosotros no rescatamos nuestro espacio, ¿quién lo va a hacer? Los que están haciendo los de afuera y luego hacen un montón de Airbnb, ponen las rentas bien caras en la comunidad y la gente no va a poder pagarla. Se tiene que ir.
What I'm curious
in some of these spaces,
and I guess this would be a research stream to look into their website or whatever. Where's their inputs coming from? Their supply chain. They must have a supply chain of sorts to do renovations.
Right. Yeah.
They put in 120,000. Where'd that?
Yeah, it's got to come from somewhere.
Did they fundraise it? Was it from their own pockets? Are they middle class enough?
Yeah.
This is what I plan to do with my middle class income when I get there.
Yeah.
50 grand. I can pour 10 grand every year into a building.
I think that's really
regardless
smart.
of what it is.
Yeah.
More. I'm about that right now, but once I'm actually owning the built houses, I know that, and I do plan on co-owning, so that will also make this possible. But I know there'll be all those more costs, actually paying taxes, actually paying for housing insurance, actually paying for the infrastructure involved, replacing boilers or things, or putting in better infrastructure long term, which will be 10 grand bits there and there. So on and so on.
I think that, yeah.
I mean, it's 9 grand strategy. Lowest for solar panels is like 9 grand. And that's with generous, sort of generous grants.
Yeah. Yeah. And Minneapolis, St. Paul, we have a program where they will install solar panels for free, and you end up owning them after like 10 years or something like that. But then they take the power or the revenue generated from the power for a certain period of that time. So. Yeah,
that's where the whole, renewable energy for all thing is, where like the energy is being put into the grid. So if the grid can't handle it,
right,
and the grid is the utilities. So if the utilities aren't making money off of it, then they can't pay anything for it. And so this new energy is not going to be paid. You can't pay for it. You can't financially support it.
Right.
So even when the argument of, oh, it'll pay for itself within a decade.
Yeah.
Will it? Can it?
Good point. Good point.
You do it for its own sake, of course, but if it's not cutting your bills or making you energy independent from the private utilities, then what is it?
What really are you doing? Yeah.
You're just shifting their production from a gas plant to your roof.
Absolutely.
But it's still fossil fuel made pieces.
Right. Yeah. 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 They have not worked out all that, and the rare earth minerals that are needed for.
I mean, think about the one wind turbine is made up of like 6,000 pieces. And so it's super complex, and thus all those points of failure, but also just parts that are made of plastic and oil and petroleum products.
And it has a working life, and then you have a giant structure.
If it's made of wood, that's a different story. So make a windmill out of wood, hook it up to some like spare generator. Storage is still the issue, but this is where hydro comes in, using that as a fill-in.
Absolutely.
But where, there's only so many streams in Albany, but.
Well, cool. So links in the chat if anyone wants to explore this further. I think we should probably just wrap up for the night.
Yeah.
At this point.
No, there isn't too much more to learn. Just that they're doing
project.
what I thought Occupy movement should have been doing.
Yeah.
Right afterwards. And some elements did attempt this actually, but in the metro areas of America, there's a bit more stricter enforcement of private property rights than here in abandoned Puerto Rican towns. Like if we were doing this in America, like I don't know how long you get away with it. Eventually the sheriff's coming around and forcing you out. That's what happens when you squat and you advertise that you are. It's sort of interesting how they got away with that, and that's something they don't kind of explore in this video, but it's a short one. So maybe it's something to look. Maybe I need to do.
Yeah, definitely be something to check out. How they get
because could this only be replicated in a state like Puerto Rico, or could this be done in the hood? It seems like, I mean, with the land bank, county land bank, you can acquire these lots and stuff for 10, 15 grand. So it's very affordable. If with co-owners, but so there's that possibility too. And I always look at their listings. There was a house that was just a 1-bedroom, but it looked like there was no problems with it. There was just exterior damage. It doesn't look pretty. Thinking about it, but that's it again. I want to go into co-owning with something first.
That's cool.
Though this, anyway, this is something I need to worry about more in the summer.
Sure.
Now it's party building.
Does seem like a good strategy though.
April, May is it's petitioning for Stein. I think that's going to be my life that month. But if the Stein campaign, the rumbling is that they're going to put in $100,000 for petitioning here in New York.
Okay.
Which could be enough, but it'll at least make it a possibility, because otherwise it's impossible. We need 90,000 signatures.
90,000. Wow.
Well, we were brainstorming something that made us excited, actually, where it's like at SUNY Albany, the suits aren't there anymore. The suits referring to an administration that is anti-political. And I think the administration must be more tolerant of political activity. So there was a thought in our little meeting that was last week. We should just go petitioning on campus, and if we hit the cafeteria a few times, we'll get our 1,000 signatures.
Right.
For the area, we'll get hundreds and hundreds.
That's not a bad strategy.
Because that's something that limited us in the past, that we were basically like, we needed students to do, only students could do anything, and they probably couldn't even petition. But if we could just go and a student lets us in the dorm, if we ask them, we could go door to door.
Some guerrilla petitioning.
But even if we were just on the podium, I think we could probably do better.
Sure, yeah. But yeah, that sounds
better
like a
than
good
doing
strategy
Tulip
too.
Fest. Okay then. Good night, Zach. Thank you for chatting again. Let's maybe we do it next week since we went 3 weeks. Or
sure, yeah, we can do it next week.
And I'll make an effort to make some more funny or interesting videos.
All these were good ones tonight. I enjoyed them.
Okay. So. I got some urban planning ones. I got.
Be nice to get back to that.
One about land trusts. So we haven't specifically covered land trusts, but we've talked about them. I'll poke around for something interesting. Yeah. So otherwise, I'll just communicate. Otherwise, so thank you for watching. Anyone who has watched or will watch.
Yeah, got a couple people watching right now. So
3 Left Show, full podcast. Good listening before bed.
Absolutely.
And I will be TikToking, though I keep putting it off. I'm really bad. The idea was to do some this weekend, but I didn't. It's strange that I have to think about scripting and doing the TikTok. It's not something I do on the fly. If I do, I don't feel like it was worth it. But like, how do these kids and young people? I guess the influencers, it's their job. They are putting a lot of effort into these. Like, because I'm looking at the app.
Well, they also got teams behind them too. That are cutting and editing and
I suppose. Yeah, because there's a lot of steps. With especially when it's like a bunch of little videos.
Absolutely.
I'm like, do they stop and start? Like, I don't like. I feel like I would need a video editor for that.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I'm sure.
Okay.
Good. All right. Zach. Well, thanks again for joining, and look forward to next week. See what you bring then.
Bye.
Bye. That was Dan Platt of the 3 Left Show. Put the link there up to the site for his podcast, which is recently come to an end. He's going to focus on other stuff now. So 3lefts.news. Check out his archives now. Really, really great show. Can't recommend it enough. Yep, not enough people to do a raid tonight, so we will just instead find a Twitch channel to shout out. We'll see who's on right now. Maybe we'll raid him anyway. I mean, even if it's just me and a couple people coming over. There's definitely people that enjoy the raid no matter what. So let's see who's on right now. Mass Praxis. Let's see what they're talking about. Okay. Mass Praxis talking about the crisis in Gaza. So that's a good one to go check out now. Put the link up there in the chat. We won't do a formal raid or anything. Thanks y'all for joining, and who knows, maybe sometime this week I'll manage to get another Tears of the Kingdom stream in or something. At some point I do got to get back into doing the actual theory streams. We've been reading People's History now for over a year, maybe even a year and a half at this point. So it's about time to wrap that up, huh? So yeah, maybe I'll make some time this week to do it. But otherwise, I will see you all next Sunday. So have a good one, everybody.